In yesterday's video or lesson, we learned about conjugating ER and IR verbs. And we focused on the verb comer, to eat, and the verb compartir, to share. Today we're going to be doing a little review, and we're also going to be doing two new verbs with what we learned yesterday. So first things first, we need to remember our endings. Do you remember what the endings for the ER verbs are? I'll give you a second to think and say them to yourself out loud. If you said O, S, E, hemos, N, you are correct. The ER verb endings are O, S, E, hemos, N. Now, let's review the IR verb endings. Do you remember what the IR verb endings are? I'll give you a second to think about them and say them out loud to yourself. If you said O, S, E, hemos, N, then you are correct. Remember that these endings are almost identical except when it comes to nosotros, we. One is hemos for ER verbs and one is hemos for IR verbs. All right, moving on to the second parts of our notes today. We're going to review how we conjugate a verb. Whether it's an AR verb, an ER verb, or an IR verb, the conjugation is the same thing. We always have to ask ourselves for step one, who is doing the action? Step two, I'm going to drop the ending. Whether it's AR, but in this case, it is ER and IR. Those are our endings that we're focusing on this week. And lastly, step three, I am going to change the ending to say who is doing the action. When we look at our verb charts, we already have our who's here, right? Yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. For the first example, I am going to focus on the verb beber. Beber means to drink. And it is an ER verb because it ends with ER. So I'm going to go through the process of conjugating the verb, changing the ending. I'm going to go through the 3 steps. Step 1, who is doing the action? I know that yo is doing the action. Step 2, drop the ending. So I'm going to drop the ER and I'm left with beb. I'm going to write beb. Step 3 says change the ending to say who is doing the action. And once again, I ask myself, who is doing the action? Yo is doing the action. So I'm going to go back into my cheat sheet if I don't remember. And I know that my ending is going to be O for this person. Okay, so it's yo, bebo. I'm going to go through this process for all the verbs. Or I'm sorry, for all the other persons with this verb. And beb is going to repeat itself. And I'm just going to write my endings. O, S, E, hemos, N. Now, for our second example, we have the verb subir. Subir is an IR verb because it ends in IR. And subir in English means to climb up or to go up. And I'm going to go through the same process for all the persons. We're going to start with nosotros. So I already know step 1, who is doing the action? Nosotros is doing the action. We. Step 2, I'm going to drop the IR, drop my ending, and I'm left with sub. I'm going to write sub. And then step 3 says, change the ending to say who is doing the action. Who is doing the action? Nosotros is doing the action. So I'm going to go back to my little cheat sheet and know that my ending is hemos, right? Or I can also remember my chant. O, S, E, hemos, N. So I'm going to write imos because that is my ending. I'm going to do the same process for all the other persons, and all of them share in common, sub, 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 and I'm going to plug in my endings. O, as, imos, en. Again, that's O, as, imos, en. These are now two different examples of ER-IR verbs. From this point on, you are ER-IR verb conjugator masters. Any ER or IR verb that I throw at you, you should be able to change it and manipulate it in the very same way, regardless of whether you know what it means or not, because the process will be the same. That is it for today's lesson, chicos. Adios.